The former CEO of Eskom, Brian Molefe, is expected to return to his former job. Molefe left the power utility at the beginning of this year following the Public Protector's State of Capture report. Joining us now, Bernard Hotz. He is Head of Business Crimes at Worksman's Attorneys and the Managing Director of Mina Holdings, Vuslat Bayoglu. It's a coal mining company. We get his perspective given Eskom's ties with the coal sector. Bernard, this seems to be a remarkable move here. Now, I'm not sure if there's a legal aspect on the in the HR sense about the way Brian Molefe left and coming back. 30 million rand pension stroke bonus, mystery about that. You can't generate 30 million rand in pension power in a few months, effectively 18 months. So what are the legal aspects here? What do you have to think about?
The first thing that I had to think of this morning when I woke up is to check the date, because I thought it may have been the 1st of April. But let's leave that aside for a moment. I haven't been privy to seeing the actual contract, but let's look at the law. The law is quite simple in this regard. We all know that when we are employed, we have pension benefits. The pension benefits are administered by a pension and provident fund. It's a separate legal entity, and here you have a separate legal entity, the Eskom Pension and Provident Fund. As a fact, we know that Mr. Molefe tendered his resignation. He was entitled to tender his resignation, and that was accepted. What would then happen is he'd be entitled to receive his pension fund benefits. Now let's look at what people actually said, and I'm going to quote something because this comes from a newspaper article and I don't want to be accused of misquoting. Mr. Molefe says, "I won't comment about figures. You can ask Eskom for that. All I can say is that I didn't receive any severance package, but I was paid pension benefits that I was entitled to," he says. Eskom spokesman says, "I'm not privy to how much the board decided to pay Mr. Molefe, but I can tell you that the payment would be reflected in our annual report." Now, pension payments are not reflected in annual reports. So are we talking about a pension payment, or are we talking about a golden handshake? So it's a little bit confusing. The bottom line is what one traditionally sees happening in situations where an employee reaches an agreement, a termination agreement, is you may find a term in there that there's a severance payment. If the employer fails to honor the severance payment, what you generally see happening is the employee will not be entitled to resume his or her duties, but will have a damages claim against the employer for breaching the terms of the settlement agreement. If the pension fund was going to be part of a settlement severance agreement, which I haven't seen the agreement, but there would have had to have been a third party to that agreement, namely the Eskom Pension and Provident Fund. Then if we look at 30 million rand, they've done the calculations. Mr. Molefe would have had to have earned a gross package of 243 million rand per annum in order to be entitled to the 30 million rand pension payout.
Because of the short period he was there, relatively.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the problem that one has is, from a legal perspective, resigning or retracting the pension, the so-called pension issue, does not breathe life back into an employment contract. He resigned. It was accepted. The contract is finished.
But they can reappoint him under a new contract.
They can reappoint under a new contract, but it's not linked.
Also, maybe let's bring you into this conversation. Were you as shocked as Bernard when you woke up early this morning? And when Brian Molefe left, he left under a cloud at Eskom because of the State of Capture report that found that Eskom and Tegeta was given favourable dealings when it came to their contract.
I think we should separate Eskom and Brian Molefe, because Eskom is the heart of the country, and it has to operate properly. And unfortunately, in this case, board of Eskom made a wrong decision, an unfortunate decision rather. So Eskom produces 45% of the power in Africa. So we need to be careful when we talk about the largest company of South Africa, and then separate it from the board's unfortunate decision, because I'm a businessman and we make wrong decisions. I think in this case, board of Eskom made a wrong decision and made a wrong deal, rather, and now they have to fix it. And when they are fixing it, they make a worse decision. So they have to...
What's the wrong deal you're talking about?
Wrong deal is like, I mean, think about it. I'm thinking about it. Like, let's say I'm the employer of Brian Molefe. If I want him to get out, because he's not successful, then I offer him something, and let's say it's 30 million rand, and then he leaves the company. Eskom can afford to pay him 30 million rand, even though it's a wrong number.
But as Bernard says, under what calculation? Where
That's
from?
true. The legal side is something else.
Yeah.
But let's say they agreed to pay him 30 million rand. They had to pay him 30 million rand and gone. Instead of bringing him back. Now think about the morale of the company in Eskom. I'm not saying the alternative to Brian is a better option, because we saw what happened with the acting CEO. But I think board of Eskom has to do something, or the government has to do something to change.
Of course, what's not clear here is whether it's the board or the minister or both, and whose hand is in this. Bernard, in terms of this moving around of Brian Molefe, coming back to a position, being reappointed, do you take an interest at all in where this comes from? Is it the board? I mean, there's a problem here with the shareholder, as they call it, the government, and the board, and there is a view that all the SOE boards are toy telephones. The minister actually tells them what to do.
I have a greater concern. My greater concern is that in terms of the Constitution, we are all presumed to be innocent until we've been proven guilty in a court of law. But as a fact, what we have is we have a state of capture report produced by the Public Protector. We have a constitutional court which says that the remedial action of a Public Protector is binding. We have a Public Protector who stipulates a commission of inquiry is to be established. In order to go into these various issues, there is a cloud hanging over people's heads, including Mr. Molefe. He's entitled to deny that it is with merit. That's his right. But there is a cloud.
And
it has
changed.
to be, nothing has
changed since that
So
report.
how can we rewind the clock and go back? Remembering, he said, I'm resigning from Eskom because I believe in good corporate governance. I've got this cloud over my head. Well, the commission hasn't been established. There's no review application. In fact, the DA have gone to court, as I understand, to compel the commission of inquiry to be established.
Yeah.
So what does that then mean about the board when you talk about corporate governance and the board's role in enforcing corporate governance at Eskom? We've got Matsela Koko as well, who's being implicated in some controversy around his stepdaughter getting a 1 billion rand contracts with Eskom.
People, board of control, whether it's a board of control or board of directors, they have fiduciary duties. They have to comply with the law. And importantly, there's a very important act called the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, where if you have a reasonable suspicion that there's a corrupt act that has happened, you are obliged to report it. So now we have people sitting as a board where there is a cloud, people have fiduciary duties to comply with. What do? And that's why I've heard this afternoon that the EFF and the DA are contemplating taking legal advice, bringing an urgent application to interdict Mr. Molefe from assuming his position on Monday, pending the outcome of a review application, because after all, the actions that they've taken are administrative actions, and they are to be adjudicated in terms of the promotion and administration of justice.
Vuslat, you're in the coal sector. Tegeta is one of the companies alleged to have been favoured by Eskom because of links through the government, through President Zuma, with the Gupta family. Complex, but on the other hand, quite a simple connection which has been alleged. What's your perception from within the industry of what's been happening?
David, Eskom buys 120 million tons of coal per annum. It's the biggest buyer in the country and one of the biggest in the world. Obviously, where there's no smoke, there's no fire, right? And we are privy. I'm privy to certain information. What is talked within the industry that Tegeta deal or optimum deal is not really sounding right to anybody, and it's actually it's sad for the country, because the critical thing for this country is to buy the power or to produce the power at the right price. If the power is produced at high price, that means inflation. And if you know, we know for years the power is subsidized by the government. Yet we've got lots of coal, abundance of coal, and it's open cost. It can be produced at a very cheap price. I came to this country in 2001, cheapest power in the world. Where are we now? We are not cheapest anymore. We are like medium in the middle of in terms of scale of power price. So the question is, if they buy the coal at a high price, then the power is going to be high, because a power station, a coal-fired power station's biggest cost, 80% of the cost is coal price. So the question that we need to ask Eskom, which we can't ask because they're not transparent, at what price are you buying the coal from Tegeta, and at what price are you buying the coal from South 32 or Anglo-American or Sasol or Total, wherever they're buying the coal from? So we can't ask that question. There's no transparency. That's the biggest challenge. If Eskom is transparent about the price, if there's an index for the coal that they buy, then the problem is going to be solved, because the corruption in terms of buying coal will be minimized. But there's no index. That's the challenge.
Well, we're just scratching the surface here of a complex issue, and a very puzzling issue in many ways. That's Bernard Hotz. He is Head of Business Crimes at Worksman's Attorneys and the Managing Director of Mina Holdings, Vuslat Bayoglu.